Billionaire CEO, saw a single dad waiter fired for giving food to her mute son. She walked up and said, not the awkward kind of quiet, but the kind that makes your chest tighten, the kind that tells you something has just gone terribly wrong. Ethan froze where he stood, his hands still trembling from the tray he'd just set down. Across the room, his 6-year-old son, Noah, stared at the broken plate with wide eyes. Noah didn't cry. He never did. He couldn't speak, but his silence carried more weight than any scream. And that's when the manager shouted, "You're done. Get out." Ethan felt the words before he understood them. He had known this day might come. You don't give away food in a place that counts every crumb. You don't bend rules when you're already one late paycheck away from losing everything. But when your child looks at you with hunger in his eyes and no voice to ask for help, rules start to feel very small. Noah sat at a corner table every afternoon, drawing quietly while Ethan worked his shift. Today, he'd skipped lunch at school. The free meal program had run out of funding again. Ethan had seen the way Noah's hands shook when he tried to color, so Ethan did the only thing he could live with. He brought his son a plate of food. Just some rice. Some chicken. Nothing fancy. Nothing expensive. But kindness has a way of costing people who can least afford it. "You stole from this restaurant," the manager snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Pack your things." Ethan opened his mouth to explain, but the words stuck. Years of apologizing had taught him something painful: explanations don't matter when people have already decided who you are. He knelt beside Noah, gently brushing glass away from the floor. Noah reached up and touched his father's cheek, a soft, familiar gesture that said everything words never could. And that was when she stood up. She had been sitting near the window the entire time. Quiet, composed, dressed simply enough that no one noticed her at first. No assistants, no entourage. Just a woman with sharp eyes, and a presence that made the room lean toward her, without knowing why. She walked toward them calmly. Every step felt deliberate. "I'm sorry," she said gently, not to the manager, but to Ethan. "Did I hear you were fired for feeding your child?" The manager puffed up. "Mom, he violated company policy." She nodded slowly, then looked at Noah. He met her gaze without fear. She noticed the way he communicated, with his eyes, his hands, the small notebook on the table, filled with drawings instead of words. Something in her expression changed. "My name is Claire Whitmore," she said quietly. A few people gasped. Someone whispered it like a secret too big to hold. "That's the CEO. Founder. Billionaire. The woman whose name was on the building's donor wall. The reason this restaurant chain existed at all." The manager's face drained of color. Claire turned back to Ethan. "May I sit?" He nodded, stunned. She pulled out a chair and lowered herself to Noah's level. Slowly, respectfully, she took a pen from her purse and wrote on a napkin. "Hello. My name is Claire." She slid it across the table. Noah read it carefully, then smiled. He picked up his pencil and wrote back in careful letters. "I'm Noah." Claire swallowed hard. She looked up at Ethan. "How long has he been mute?" "Since birth," Ethan said softly. "He hears everything, feels everything. He just speaks differently." Claire nodded. "So did my son." Ethan blinked. "You have a son?" "I did," she said, her voice steady but thinner now. "He passed away 8 years ago." The restaurant faded into the background. "He was mute too," Claire continued. "And when he was Noah's age, a waiter once slipped him extra bread because he noticed my son couldn't ask for more." She paused. "That waiter was fired." The air felt heavy. I didn't say anything. Claire said. I was in a hurry. I had meetings. I had a company to run. Her eyes met Ethan's. I think about that moment more than any business decision I've ever made. She stood up slowly and turned to the manager. You fired a man for choosing compassion, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. In my company. The manager stammered. Ems. Whitmore. You're right, she said calmly. Policies exist. But leadership exists to decide when humanity matters more. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Effective immediately. This restaurant's policy will be updated. Any employee who feeds a hungry child will be reimbursed, not punished. The room erupted in whispers. She wasn't finished. And as for you, she said to Ethan, you're not fired. He shook his head. I can't stay here after. I agree, she said gently. You deserve better. She turned to the stunned staff. This man just reminded me why I started this company. Then she faced Ethan again. I'd like to offer you a job. Silence. Not as a waiter, she added. As a community outreach coordinator. We fund school meal programs, family support initiatives. And I need someone who understands hunger the way spreadsheets never will. Ethan's knees nearly gave out. I don't have a degree, he whispered. Claire smiled. Neither did my father. He built everything with kindness and calloused hands. Noah tugged at his sleeve and held up his notebook. Inside was a drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands. Ethan broke down. Weeks later, Ethan wore a different uniform. One that didn't smell like grace or fear. Noah sat beside him at a small desk, coloring happily while people came in asking for help, and leaving with hope. Claire visited often. She always knelt to Noah's level. Always wrote notes, instead of speaking for him. One afternoon, as sunlight filled the room, Ethan finally asked, why did you really stop that day? Claire looked around at the families laughing, eating, being seen. Because kindness still matters, she said softly. And I learned too late what happens when we walk past it.